Hey there, friends. My name is Jim, and today I'd like to talk to you a little bit about Russia and Ukraine because, as you may have seen, Putin did a bit of a speech today in which he recognized both the Donetsk region and the Luhansk region as independent of Ukraine. And then he sent his military in. So, to preface that, I'd like to tell you a little bit about what's happened over the last 24 hours, and we will start with the propaganda that America has been putting out to the airwaves for Russia and Ukraine to be hearing for days and weeks and months. As you may have heard in the news over and over and over and over again, Putin is sending his troops to the border of Ukraine. What you may not have heard is that he does this every year. This is a consistent thing, and it's not like a crazy thing. And actually, if you notice, then you look back in the Wayback Machine or archive.com, you'll notice that there has been a similar upswell of rah-rah-rahing against Russia whenever he does this. However, this time it seems to have gone a little bit further, perhaps at the US's behest, considering the amount of war propaganda that's come out, which is honestly all that we can call this. For instance, let's take a look at Jake Sullivan talking about Russian putting LGBT Ukrainians in concentration camps. So, just to preface this, you need to know that the U.S. was claiming, let's start with the Washington Post. The U.S. claims Russia has a list of Ukrainians to be killed or sent to camps following a military occupation. This is by Josh Hudson and Missy Ryan yesterday at 9:38 p.m. So, late in the evening, they heard about this evil plot, and they had to let people know about it, because this is evil, if it were to be true. It's very, 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 very bad thing to claim some state is doing, because inherently it means that you may have to intervene. I mean, depending on whether or not they're China, apparently, but we can go into that in a different video. But let's start with this. The United States has informed the United Nations it has credible information showing that Moscow is compiling lists of Ukrainians, quote, to be killed or sent to camps following a military occupation, unquote, according to a letter to the UN Human Rights Chief obtained by the Washington Post on Sunday night. The letter alleges that Moscow's post-invasion planning would involve torture, forced disappearances, and, quote, widespread human suffering, unquote. It does not describe the nature of the intelligence that undergirds its assessment. Read U.S. letter to the UN alleging Russia is planning human rights abuses in Ukraine. The new warning comes after the Biden administration, amid weeks of speculation about President Vladimir Putin's intentions in Ukraine, said last week that the Russian leader had decided to launch an invasion. So, last week, there were several U.S. intelligence agencies that came out and said that Tuesday, Putin's invading on Tuesday. Putin is definitely invading on Tuesday. Now, some weird stuff's happened, and it's Monday night over here in the East Coast. You know, guess their intelligence is pretty good. I don't know. Maybe they did it. Who knows? Okay, so, speaking to journalists on a Daily Call Monday, Kremlin spokesman Dmitry Peskov denied the letter's claims. Quote, do you realize this is an absolute canard, a lie? It is absolute fiction. There's no such list. It's a fake, Peskov said. The letter, written by Beth Crocker, the U.S. ambassador to the United Nations and other international organizations in Geneva, said, quote, I would like to bring to your attention disturbing information recently obtained by the United States that indicates that human rights violations and abuses in the aftermath of a further invasion are being planned. If you are an eagle eye and a bit of a news hawk like I am, that you keep an eye on the news, you may have noticed that the other day, the Biden administration was doing a press conference on Ukraine, and somebody mentioned that there may be false flags that Russia does, specifically in order to make it look like Ukraine did something bad, so that Russia can use that as a pretense to invade. Now, the reporter actually happened to have a set of balls in him that day and said, where's the evidence for this? And he said, I just told you the evidence. And he said, no, you just told me that you have evidence. And he said, yes, me telling you that is the evidence. And the reporter kind of must have been like, I don't know, he must have divorced his wife or something. I respect him, whatever it was. And he just kind of went off saying, oh, what is this, Alex Jones with the false flags and the yada, yada, yada. And he went on for a minute. Sorry I don't have that video, but look it up. It's pretty entertaining if you want to see somebody go off. But anyways, this is the type of reporting that's been going on for weeks now. And along with that, you have Jake Sullivan here, the part of the Biden administration. Former Hillary Clinton advisor and current national security advisor Jake Sullivan. Let's take a look at what he has to say in this specific little chunk that I pulled out here. You know.
Well, we believe that any military operation of the size, scope, and magnitude of what we believe the Russians are planning will be extremely violent. It will cost the lives of Ukrainians and Russians, civilians and military personnel alike. But we also have intelligence to suggest that there will be an even greater form of brutality, because this will not simply be some conventional war between two armies. It will be a war waged by Russia on the Ukrainian people to repress them, to crush them, to harm them. And that is what we laid out in detail for the UN, because we believe that the world must mobilize to counter this kind of Russian aggression should those tanks roll across the border, as we anticipate they very...
Okay, so this is, you know, more of the same, saying that the Russia has some kind of, I don't know, in their blood, some kind of genetic trait that makes them want to oppress and murder and make lists and concentration camps and all this crazy jazz. Well, to the rest of the world, it looks like Russia is just going, hey, we're doing a, you know, war thing. But I do have to say, Putin, I don't know if maybe it was his World Economic Forum buddies that said, hey, time to play ball, or what happened, but he seems to have taken the step that I did not accept him to take. So, moving on a little bit. This was prior to Putin's announcement, but this is also germane to the conversation. So, this was semi-widely reported prior to the speech that happened today. This person tweeting, earlier, a Ukrainian recon sabotage group attempted to enter Russian territory in the Rostov region. They were destroyed by Russian border guards. Russia says 5 Ukrainian soldiers were killed and several vehicles were destroyed. They claim 1 soldier was captured alive. And here they have some footage of burning Ukrainian or Russian, well, supposedly Ukrainian military vehicles that were going to be used to sabotage their tasks at the border, is their claim. Now, was this a false flag? Did this actually happen? Who knows? But, you know, considering how much news has been thrown around on both sides, literally nobody possibly could know. It's the story of the boy cried wolf, forced the boy to cry wolf over and over and over and over again, so when the wolf comes, nobody believes the boy, maybe. Who knows? Moving on, this is still the Russian... Sorry. This is the head of RT, texting about it. The Russian military and border guards prevented the violation of the border by a sabotage and reconnaissance group from #Ukraine. 5 violators were killed. There are no losses among Russian soldiers, reports the Southern Military District. So I mention this because this was the first violent, baby shot heard around the world that had been reported by the people following the Ukraine story. So apparently 5 Ukrainian soldiers were killed. Now, there was word that President Biden and Putin agreed to a tentative meeting to discuss Ukraine. Now, this was yesterday, February 20th at 2:53 p.m., and a lot has changed since then, but what their agreement was, according to the people who reported it, specifically in this case, Emma Bowman, for NPR, President Joe Biden is willing to meet with Russian President Vladimir Putin in principle, as long as Russia does not invade Ukraine, the White House said on Sunday night, after a day of diplomacy brokered by French President Emmanuel Macron. So, what Biden had Macron do, because Macron and Putin have some kind of weird relationship, some kind of bro thing, so he was having Macron sit there and basically talk Putin's ear off, saying, just don't invade Ukraine, just don't invade Ukraine. And Putin was sitting there like, I'm not, okay? It's crazy that you guys are loading up people there saying they're going to be part of NATO, because that's right on my doorstep, and NATO kind of was designed to stop Russian expansion, and I'm Russia, I'd like to expand. That whole spiel. Plus, they consider part of Ukraine part of their sovereign territory. So Emmanuel Macron was there to talk his ear off and say, just don't go into these particular areas, don't invade Ukraine. I know you have a chance because the U.S. is weak, because they weren't even able to pull off getting out of Afghanistan without having their soldiers killed and having hostages taken. But just don't do it, buddy, please. And they were at the point where Macron had finally talked him into meeting with Putin. Now, the point was you couldn't invade Ukraine. We're agreeing to this meeting in principle as long as you didn't invade Ukraine. My assumption is the people who control Biden were like, we can probably hold his diapers on, and we can get enough Zoloft or whatever, amphetamine in him to make sure that he can talk. And we'll do that as long as you don't invade Ukraine. It'll give us a couple days to keep the media shitstorm going. That's just me. I'm not one of the great enlightened, NPR columnists, so consider me a wackadoo person that take it with a grain of salt. Now, the problem with this, as we are going to continue to go, is Vladimir Putin today. he
not only announced
had
the
a
formal
long 45-minute
of these
speech where he
breakaway
talked about
republics in
how
southeast
these
Ukraine.
two regions,
He
Donetsk
has
and
signed
Luhansk,
the
which have
decree
been separatist
doing
regions
so.
in
So
Ukraine,
no question about it
places
now.
that
He has signed the
Ukraine
decree.
considered part of itself that they did not consider themselves part of Ukraine. They would prefer to be part of Russia. Kind of like the Taiwan situation in China, where Taiwan wants to be independent, China wants it to be one China. But in this case, imagine that Ukraine has a couple of regions that are like, we want to be part of Russia, we want to be part of Russia. This is kind of what caused a lot of the fighting in 2014. They were able to have a ceasefire where they agreed that Donetsk and Luhansk were going to be independent regions, but they would still be part of Ukraine. And now Putin has said that he just considers them basically countries now, or independent regions. And as a show of them being independent regions, he has, well, also, I want to say that Syria opened up and said that they're willing to join Russia in recognizing Donetsk and Luhansk as independent Russian lawmaker says. Now, that is to point out that Syria is okay with it. Syria is important for pipelines. There's all kinds of pipeline deals going on here, so that's important to keep in the background. But the more important thing happened to be, well, here is Donetsk. I'm sorry, I have a problem pronouncing these Russian town names. Donetsk, following Putin's address. I don't know if this is propaganda or not. Maybe this is how we're World Economic Forum actors being invaded in order to let World War III happen. Maybe. I think it's probably more likely that they just are okay with becoming part of Russia. And if that's their choice, I guess that's their choice. We don't need a whole big conspiracy here for this particular part of this global chess game. Although it could be there. So, again, Dean O'Brien here. Twitter can be a horrible place at times, so it's a nice decision by President Putin to recognize the DONBASS republics as the news people have been looking forward to for 8 years. I'll sign off tonight with a video from Lenin Square in Donetsk. Hashtag DONBASS. So the whole region that has committed itself not to being part of Ukraine is collectively known as the DONBASS region. It's the place that is contested, which was the main reason that that Ukraine couldn't be invited into NATO in the first place, is because if you have a contested region on your borders, you can't be invited into NATO. You can't be accepted or invited into NATO. So that wasn't, there could have been something worked out like what happened with Colombia, where they are a working group within NATO, but not NATO. But Russia doesn't even want that, because we have to imagine it like the Cuban Missile Crisis. When Russia was putting missiles, Russia and Cuba were allies. What's wrong with Russia storing some of their missiles in Cuba? Well, it's 70 miles from Florida. Well, Ukraine is becoming NATO's ally. What's wrong with NATO storing some of their missiles in Ukraine? Well, they are literally right next to Russia. So you force him to put his troops on the border as you push him and push him and push him and push him and say, no, we're going to make Ukraine part of NATO no matter what. But he goes, okay, well, I guess I'll just take part of it then. What did you think he was going to do, Biden? What did anybody think he was going to do? What did anybody think anybody was going to do when we started pushing this in the first place? Well, I think that he saw a financial crisis coming, and he decided that this is a perfect reason to say, oh no, World War III happened and there was a financial crash, of course, rather than I really messed up when I was doing my COVID, relief package and printed way too much money and there was going to be a backlash, so let's blame it on a war. Now, again, Biden, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, Ted Cruz, they're all way smarter than I am. I'm just a random clod on YouTube, so don't listen to me, listen to them. But, moving on. This is what may cause a bit of a hiccup, is Putin decided to send a peacekeeping mission into the Donbas region with some tanks. And, yeah, this is not a joke. They were legit sending tanks into the region. It's a bit sketchy. Let's see here. Russian troops and equipment authorized by Vladimir Putin to, quote, keep the peace in Donetsk and Luhansk breakaway regions in occupied eastern Ukraine have now crossing the border. Confirmed. Hashtag Ukraine-Russia crisis. Now, you could look at this from 2 points of view. You could consider this eastern Ukraine being invaded by Russia. If that is what you want to consider this,
تظهر تلك الصور دخول عدد من الدبابات.
that may end up in World War III type scenario, considering that the U.S. is going to be like, well, Ukraine's supposed to be sovereign territory. If Ukraine wants this land, it's Ukraine's land, and we will fight to help Ukraine. And then, boom, Russia says no, we are gonna fight for our region that want to live with us. Maybe China says no, we just made that China-Russia pact where we said we would recognize the sovereignty of each other's borders. They said Taiwan's part of China. I said Donbass was part of Russia. We agreed we had each other's backs. You want to mess with Russia, you mess with me. That statement just went out February, what was it, like 4th? February 6th? They just had that summit, specifically probably for this, because what I believe is going to happen is this happens, right? The whole world is freaked out about Ukraine. The media industrial complex wraps it up, makes it this huge mission of we need to help Ukraine, we need to help Ukraine. Quietly, in the background, China goes on into Taiwan. Now, nobody talks about that because our media societal complex has been completely overtaken by Chinese national, people, students, professors, teachers, educators, journalists. It goes all the way up and down the chain of government. So specifically, they could make us completely ignore while they take Taiwan in the same way they made us completely ignore while they took Hong Kong. If you remember, in 2019, there was an awful lot of protest that was happening in Hong Kong where people were worried about, there's this, encroaching Chinese totalitarianism that's coming because the agreement that we would stay independent is running out and blah, blah, blah. And then all of a sudden COVID happened and everybody forgot about Hong Kong, and what happened? It was slowly just gobbled up by China. Well, if we're all looking to Russia, what keeps them from doing that to Taiwan? And I hate to say this, Ukraine, but Ukraine is not as strategic and important point as Taiwan is. Taiwan processes something like 40% of all microprocessors. They're the ones who manufacture them. If we lose our ability to get those from Taiwan, then who's making them? China. Okay? They make the microprocessors that go into our missiles that may eventually be aimed at them. That does not sound like a great plan, is all I'm saying. So, again, I'm not one of our leaders. I'm not one of our betters. I'm just a guy with a frog on his t-shirt. But, Hong Kong, here we go. Of course, I wanted to pull up the OSCE, which is the Organization for Security and Cooperation in Europe. This was the organization that originally organized the ceasefire, organized the allowance of the Donbass region to be an independent organization within Ukraine while Russia back off so that there could be a ceasefire, which is what happened in 2014. And they put out a joint statement between them and a couple of other organizations saying, this step is a breach of international law and fundamental OSCE principles that runs counter to the Minsk agreements. As all OSCE participating states, Russia has undertaken commitments to respect the sovereignty and territorial integrity of others. We call on Russia to immediately rescind this decision. The recognition will only fuel further tensions and will separate populations living in these regions from the rest of their country, Ukraine. Okay, that is certainly something to be considered, and if I was Putin, I may be considering it. But at the same time, he has to consider that his stock percentage are down 14%. The USA said that they're going to ban investment and trade with the Donbass region, the Democratic Republic of Donbass, or whatever they're calling it. The U.S. was telling U.S. citizens in Russia to prepare for evacuation plans and issued a Russia do not travel warning. All of this adds up into a pretty simple thing that the U.S. wants a conflict with that region. For one reason or another, it really doesn't matter considering that we want a conflict, but we do get back to Biden agreeing to the tentative meeting with Putin to discuss Ukraine, and you now see why it's more important. This little part where it says, as long as Russia does not invade Ukraine. Well, Putin will say Russia didn't invade Ukraine. Putin will say Russia invaded independent territories known as Luhansk and Donetsk, whatever. The Donbass region. Yeah, he was just doing a peacekeeping mission in a adjacent country between their two borders. And what will Biden say? Will he have the statesmanship and, ability to think on his feet in order to outmaneuver Putin when he's making these kind of moves? Perhaps. Is he a Reagan or a JFK, somebody who could talk us down from a nuclear war? He's in office and I'm not. So we must be pretty good at it, right, guys? Anyways, I don't mean to be a downer. This is actually interesting. At least we got good news in the times that we live in. Interesting news, rather. Not good news necessarily, but interesting news In any case, I've got a couple of Ukrainian folks that I've pitched for interviews tomorrow. I'm going to be talking to them to see how it actually looks from their end of things. Because from our end of things, it looks like war, but it has looked like that for 2 months. So I'd like to get an on-the-ground look at what people think in Ukraine. I'll be interviewing them tomorrow, and I'll pop it up onto a video. Maybe I'll stream it live and put it on a video as well. We'll see. Anyways, if you want to help me continue my journalism, feel free to support me below. In any case, please copy the link, send it to a friend. Please like, share, subscribe, comment, have a conversation below. Let me know what you think about Ukraine and whether or not this is going to be war, or is it all just like fluster by the NWO to try and make us think there's going to be a war, distracting us from perhaps other kind of more medically relevant things? Who knows? Give me your opinion in the comment section below. Have a wonderful evening. Peace.